Hey everybody, Anthony Dodge, Mile Train Outsider, the American Outsider here, and as you can see, I'm in the room, and that means it's going to be sort of a different topic, but it is model train related, at least community related. I'm actually doing a couple of videos here. I've been trying to do the one for 2 weeks, and I just saw a video today that made me really want to get the second video out, but I want to do this first one. There's been a ton of videos in my little corner of the model train YouTube community lately where people talk about the state of the hobby, the doom and gloom, it's dying, and of course a lot of people are talking about the expenses, the cost, and so forth. And I'm not here to join or deny or agree with any of that. I just guess I want to state an observation. While I may not be the smartest model train guy, I have intelligence in other areas, and maybe just a general thought that's not going to make anybody feel better or worse, but maybe it will just help you understand the situations and, I don't know, cope with it or something. Just try to accept it. Um, Before I got into the model train hobby 8 years ago, the previous 40 years I was in various hobbies, card collecting, sports card collecting, American baseball cards, and even football cards and hockey cards, and even basketball cards at one time. I was in the comic book collecting and going to shows and the trade and all that. Then I moved into other hobbies I had as well, or concurrently that don't fit this. But then I was in the toy collecting hobby for years and years and years. I went to toy shows and trade shows and did that. And there is a trend that hits every collector. Let me try that again. There's a trend that hits every collectible hobby, and model trains, while it really covers many genres of hobby, it is a collector hobby. And I have seen the same trend occur over the decades in every hobby I've been in. I seem to always join hobbies, about 5 to 10 years before this trend really kicks in, and then see how it affects the hobby for good or for bad. And there's no way to give it a name. Sometimes I call it the corporate trend, but anyhow, here's how the trend plays out. And I'll use baseball cards and toy collecting as examples, and then you can see how that relates to um, model train world and what's going on today. When I was very young in the 60s and 70s, baseball cards, there was one company, Topps baseball cards. And Topps made baseball cards. And it was just each year a new set came out. You would mow lawns or hope to get a quarter from your dad and buy a few packs of baseball cards. And the prices went up a little bit. When I was a kid, pack of cards was a nickel each, then was a dime, and then a few years later 15 cents, and eventually in the late 70s it was a quarter a pack, but a buck still bought 4 pack of baseball cards. And you tried to collect, especially your teams, all the cards that went with your team, and you tried to get the whole set. And even then, there was a small collectible group where certain cards from the 1920s and 1930s were known to be worth money, but people just collected cards. Heck, we put them in the spokes of our bikes to make cool sounds. We didn't care about it. And then it slowly changed. And the thing that caused it to change was the recognition that, gee, older cards are worth money and people are making a lot of money on those. So all of a sudden, you have an influx of people who come into the hobby in baseball cards. We saw the same thing in the comic book industry. The comic book industry was there, and yes, there was an inflation of prices, especially after the oil embargo of the early 70s caused prices to go up across the board around the world. But comic books were doing that, but all of a sudden there were certain comic books. Oh, the Superman #1 or Amazing Comics #1. There was this. Oh, look, comic books, older comic books are worth money, and so people came in, and then certain storylines from certain comic books became popular, and then the Batman movie in 1989 with Michael Keaton came out, and more than any other major shock to the system, that movie created a huge explosion in the population of people into comic books. A lot of people got back into comic books. And so suddenly there is a new, bigger market out there. But it's a different market. It's not the people who've been reading comic books for years and years and years. It's people getting into it, and they're getting into it for, maybe they'll buy that one comic that's worth money. Okay. And then we saw the same thing in the toy collector hobby, where we all bought Star Wars toys. Now, I was already a teenager and should have been past it, but I had a younger brother, and we got into Star Wars toys, and I just like toys. And we didn't have a lot as a kid. So when I had opportunities to go to garage sales and buy other people's, I did, and that's kind of where my toy collecting hobby. But again, toys were there and there and there. But all of a sudden, people were in the early 80s were like, oh, I've got the original 12 pack. They noticed there were difference in packaging. And people are like, oh, I lost my Luke Skywalker figure. And people are like, well, I've got this one, but it's on the original 9 back or whatever. And suddenly a huge group of people start coming into the hobby because they're not so much even wanting to buy all the toys. Some do. The next movie comes out or something else comes out that gets them primed into it. And then they realize they want the old stuff, and people are saying, well, I've got the old stuff, but you're going to pay a premium for it. All right, so that's sort of each hobby goes along with a subtle increase in price and as time goes by, but then there is something that prompts an explosion where suddenly the hobby expands big. Now, in baseball cards, it was that sudden realization that certain cards, and everybody came in. Suddenly, everybody's getting into it but they're getting into the hobby to make money. They're buying cards hoping they'll sell it down the road. Well, the problem is the more stuff is being sold, the less valuable it's going to be down the road. And so companies realized they were not going to be able to maintain while the sales were good. People are going to quickly stop buying again. So the next step in all these hobbies is they create a new market. You get new companies that come in and they have gimmicks. So we went from Topps, and all of a sudden there was Dunross, and there was another company I forget, and then Upper Deck came in. But to compete, they each start creating, like in sports, we call them chase cards. Like there'd be a very rare special card, gold foil, whatever. Eventually hologram cards came in. Special rookie chase cards. And you'd have to keep buying more and more cards to find these rare ones. Action figures did the same thing. All of a sudden there are chase figures. Even to this day now, the big action figure companies, they sell a wave every time they release a group of figures. It's called a wave. They sell a wave, but you have to buy all 6 figures. And if you buy all 6 figures in the wave, you can build a 7th figure because each box in the wave. But that they get you have to buy characters you don't want to build that one character you do want. So it keeps their sales going, or it pushes people away. So they start making chasers, and then it's special deluxe editions of cards, and comic books do the same thing. Chaser comics, variant covers in comic books. This rare, like out of every 20 versions of this comic book, 2 will have this variant cover, and a third will have this variant cover. Special limited edition this. Okay, so then that goes in and the market's going, and then the market settles down and people are like, okay, so we got to come up with something else to get these people to keep paying. We're going to jack prices up. We're going to sell premium decks and premium things, and we're going to charge more money. Topps, and then there's Topps Ultra and Topps Premium and Topps holographic cards. Same thing with comic books, the special holographic. And then the other thing they might even do is create stunts. Like in the comic book industry, it became a big trend. Let's kill off Batman. Let's kill off Superman. Let's kill off Robin. Let's kill off Cyclops. Let's kill off Captain America. So big major story events in that world. In sports cards, it would be special trade editions. This guy, since we did our cards for this season, got traded, so now we have a deluxe, with him in the new uniform. They just create more gimmicks to keep making money in the hobby. And the last thing is then they start making the really expensive deluxe edition stuff. The special gatefoil titanium covered comic book, this special gold plated this special holographic gold, blah, 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 microchipped baseball card that if you, scan it over your, a QR reader, will give you something or open up a website for you. It's just gimmick after gimmick after gimmick, and they charge a lot of money because what they found out is in every hobby, I saw this in the toy industry, I saw this in the comic book, is they found out horribly that if they make these really expensive, rare items, they'll make more money on the small cult of people that will spend the extra money for that chase item than they will from the rest of the cretins buying the regular stuff. Now, obviously, every industry's had to change. Toy production, the cost of plastics and metals and so forth. Comic books, the rise of the internet. So now you can get subscriptions to all your comic books and read them online. You don't have to have the hard copies anymore. The cost of paper and printing and ink and all that. All these hobbies, same with sports cards. So most of you probably already see, like, wow, that's what I've seen happening in the model train world. Yes, that's exactly what it is. In the model train world, you had this hobby that up and down, but was fairly stable. And then something caused a massive influx of people into the hobby. People that either were in the hobby and gave it up, or people that never thought about the hobby and are now thinking about it. And you've got to compete. Well, we all know to some degree what that big explosion was that brought so many people back into the hobby or new people into the hobby. Some people forgot about the hobby, but all that time off, God, I remember Grandpa, and I've got time, and I've always thought about maybe doing it. All right, but these people come in. How do you keep them in? Well, of course, the ordinary person says, well, keep the prices low and good. But we're in a society of smartphones and computer games and all this stuff. You've got to have gimmicks. I will tell you, I am in the hobby because of the bells and the whistles. If there hadn't been a change in what model trains could do from the time my dad bought me my one and only American model train set in 1969, and I thought, okay, it runs in circles. Yeah, great deal. And now I've got a layout where my trains run in circle. But it's the bells and whistles. It's the lights. It's the sounds. It's all the added gimmicks that really made me, when I decided to buy a train for my classroom to talk about the German rail system, and then when I bought it and played with it, oh, this is cool. But now it's another bit of gimmick because the ordinary person's like, I don't want to have to pay all this money. But they're finding out that getting 4 guys to buy a $500 logo makes more money than 20 guys buying a $40 logo. So they're not necessarily worried about the mass because they know they'll make their sales this way. Now, again, I don't want to get into all the argument about how companies cut corners and, try to show off gimmicks. because the point is it's a gimmick, whether it's a good gimmick or a cheaply done gimmick. The idea is gimmick and more detail because the a small percentage of the hobby wants more detail. Now everybody, I don't care who you are, deep down you like a logo that looks more like what you see in reality, but there's a point where is the price worth the change in detail? And we can argue why don't they make cheaper lines, because at least the German companies I know, um, like Pico, Piko. I know a lot of UK guys know Pico, Peco, and even Americans. But Pico, they have three levels. Basically, the El Cheapo level, which can be analog or digital. Then they have their basic digital, and then they have their deluxe, and they give them names. It's like, uh, uh, it used to be hobby level, collector's level, and um, specialist level, something like that. And they've kind of changed the names, but they have three levels. And some locos they'll release three different versions of it. Other locos they'll release a basic version and a fully digital deluxe version of it. Miraklin has a cheaper line, which they call the well, there's Miraklin My World, which is the um, for kids, under 8 years old. But they have they used to call it the hobby level, and they've given it a new name. And I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart. But they have a basic line, but most of their stuff is digital. And even with their deluxe digital stuff, you'll see some of their locos for $200 to $250, and some of their locos for $300, $400, and steamers are always more expensive. The Europeans do put more detail in it, but yes, you get people talking about the expense that have details become so much, well, or too much. Are we caught up in that? And everybody has a different point of view. So I'm not here to sway you one way or the other. I'm just saying this is a trend you see in all collector hobbies, and it's hitting the model train world. And the model train world is a little more conservative, in, or at least it is nowadays, where it doesn't jump on any trend, but it will follow the one corporate trend, which is a few expensive models make more money than a bunch of cheaper ones. And we consider and say, no, you're driving people out of the hobby. Their numbers tell them differently. Their numbers say that enough people will come up to this idea, and they're not worried about that idea. It's hard, it's cold, but it's true. And their attitude will be, well, if you like the old stuff, you can go buy it on the aftermarket. Well, the thing is, when more people move to the aftermarket, it's economics, the law of supply and demand. As more people start wanting the old stuff, the price of the old stuff is going to go up as well. It's, if you're a budget modeler, you're not screwed, but the market is not your friend. You have to be more frugal, and I hear more and more of you on your channels talking about you really finding it harder and harder to find what you're after. There's a specific thing you're after, and the minute you're after something very specific, you just notice the prices go up because you're used to going to a trade show and I can usually buy that for $30. Well, now it's $60, or now it's $80, and every now and then you'll find an old timer, somebody that's not caught up in the whole market thing, and they have what you're after. But it just means going to more what we call in America yard sales, garage sales, boot sales in the UK, and you have to hope, or you keep scouring eBay until you find something in your price point. And if you look long enough, eventually you'll find. But that's just sort of unfortunately, this is something that happens repeatedly in the collector trades. And sometimes it will settle down and you'll see a return to the old way of doing things, and then all of a sudden that market will spike again. Uh, you know, I'm not here to tell you don't be upset. I'm not here to tell you be mad and demand, because in the end, they're going to go where the dollar is. They wouldn't do what they're doing if they didn't believe the money, go where the money is. Since some of you are euros, euros, some of you are pounds and such. So that's just kind of what I want to say. It's an observation only. But unfortunately, it's a trend that, having been across many hobbies, I'm seeing, and it's a trend that is really exploding. But again, you have what seems like, well, it becomes normal. It becomes the status quo for decades, and then all of a sudden, something creates a big influx, and the companies react to that influx. And how do they keep that influx in? And again, we can argue back and forth. Yeah, but these practices drive other people out. But their thinking, even if it's wrong thinking, is they're going to survive going this route rather than the route maybe even the majority of people want to do. Because let's face it, corporations have never cared about the majority, they care about the money. And if they have to choose between A and B, where some of us, like, you can do A and B, they may say, no, we really can't. We really have to put our resources into A, or we have to put it into B. And so that is just a trend. I saw it in the 70s and 80s with the sports card uh, hobby in the United States. I saw it in the 80s to 90s with the comic book hobby. I saw it in the toy hobby in the 90s into the early 2000s, and it still continues in the toy hobby. And now I'm seeing it in the model train world. It's just, unfortunately, it is a trend that seems to hit every collectible hobby. And again, as I said at the start, you may not think of model trains as a collectible hobby, but it is. You collect trains, and you can buy trains and trade trains, and but it is a collectible hobby along many other types of hobbies. So anyhow, just some thoughts I wanted to put out there, and I don't know what I hope to accomplish with that. I just wanted to throw that out there. Maybe some folks go, yeah, I'm seeing it. Okay. Because it's not going to change whether you like what's going on or not, but maybe it adds a little clarity to that this, unfortunately, is a trend, regardless of what hobby you go into. If it is a collector based hobby, you will see this trend develop. And it's in our hobby now. And you either ride the tide, or you'll leave the hobby, or limit yourself greatly on what you do in the hobby. So anyhow, just a thought. So I'm gonna say, Auf Wiedersehen, choose happy trains, take care, everybody.